Good morning, Moungi.
Good morning.
I'm very pleased to have you here to shoot the second episode, actually, of the New Colossus Project here at MIT. The New Colossus Project is focusing on telling the stories of trailblazing first-generation immigrants here in the United States to focus on understanding how they achieve their success in their respective fields, but also to inspire the next generation. And your success and achievement who got with your latest award of a Nobel Prize is wonderful and marvelous, and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So obviously I'm a bit biased today because we both come from a Tunisian descent, and I feel proud to have you here with me. And I think your insights and your achievements in your life will be helpful for many. And I thank you for taking the time today.
That's my pleasure.
I would love to Moungi, to start by going a bit back in time when you came to the United States from France. So your parents are Tunisian, you were living in France, and you came to Indiana. Not the most common state to move to from Paris. How was it like when you came here? What were your dreams and aspirations as a young boy coming to the United States? What was it like?
So my father was Tunisian and my mother was French. So it's a mix. It was a mixed descent like that. My mother really insisted that I try to learn some English before coming. I was 10. But as a 10-year-old, I really had no motivation to learn a little bit of English. So really, I got off the plane and I really didn't know a word of English. And West Lafayette, Indiana is the home of Purdue University. And you replace one letter and it becomes perdu in French. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt like that, which perdu means lost. The first time a kid from across the road, came and started talking to me in English, I just had no idea what he was saying. I just stared at him. It was really something. But when you're a kid, you can learn new languages really fast. I think people say that there's like a 12-year-old cutoff, before you're 12, you can learn things a lot faster with less of an accent than if you're older than 12. So I think I was right at the tipping point there. So I went to school and they took me back a grade because I had been young for my age in France. And at the beginning, really, I was lost. I was really lost. Math was the one thing that I could do that was international. And also, in a funny way, spelling, because a lot of the complicated words in English have sometimes Latin roots. Mm-hmm. And I could recognize those. But after 6 months, I was fluent. So it went pretty fast without actually having to do anything particularly special. No, I didn't have any tutors or anything like this. It was just being around the language and learning it. And so it also was quite a shock to go from the outskirts of Paris to Indiana, West Lafayette, Indiana. The thing that was special about Purdue, it is an international community in a sense because it's an academic community. Purdue is a big university, and many of the faculty are also from outside of the US. So from that perspective, it wasn't really the Midwest. The Midwest was across the river in Lafayette, which mm-hmm. was a different city and feel completely. But I quickly made friends, with the kids that were there. At the beginning, a lot of them made fun of me. I dressed differently, I spoke in a funny way. Fashion in France at the time for kids was very different than fashion for kids in the US. And my mother just didn't know that, so.
How could she?
How could she? Yeah. Yeah.
And what was did you have an image of the United States coming here, at 10? Because, you were, obviously you were young. Did you have an image in mind of what it would look like or feel like? And what did it feel like when you arrived here?
Oh, it's such a long time ago. The image that I had was probably from, reading novels like Jules Verne. But it's a different era of the United States completely, right? But yeah, it's completely different than what it actually was when I arrived. Yeah.
If we carry on a bit more in your life, so later in your life you attended the university down the river, Harvard, and then you went to University of Chicago. For a lot of first-generation immigrants coming to the U.S., building community is an important part of integration. And how did you go about building your community, and especially around mentors and and the people surrounding you? What was it like in the later years of your life?
So my interest was in science from the very beginning at a young age. And I was very lucky to have really excellent teachers, professors. Teacher in high school first, chemistry teacher. And then in my freshman year in college, really excellent pedagogical professor. And that's how I was drawn to the subject, really, through those people. And that was the beginning of really having great mentors. Professor very early on can be a kind of a mentor. He recognized also, that I was pretty good at what I was doing. Although I did fail my first exam in chemistry.
Chemistry?
At Harvard, yes.
Okay.
But after that, after I learned to study, it was fine after that. And then I was drawn to other students that were also interested in science around me. I played the violin, and so I took part in an orchestra, and my best friend was a pianist, and so we played together also. He was also interested in science, and so that's the nucleus of how you start. And then you build from that.
Yeah.
So I always had a small community of good friends, with similar interests, and I kept that through the years. I think that was really important to have that human connection.
Mm-hmm. And so you found it in similar in science, in music, and from our conversation, you were also telling me that. In your research, you really drew closer to your mentors like, Louis Bruce, and throughout your life, and that you're co-sharing your Nobel Prize with. Could you maybe share a bit more about that?
Sure. Lou Bruce was the discoverer of the quantum dots, which is what we won the Nobel Prize for in the United States. There was another group in the Soviet Union at the time that was working completely independently. But Louis I met because I got a fellowship when I was at University of Chicago as a graduate student. And it was an AT&T fellowship, and AT&T Bell Labs fellowship. It allowed me to spend a summer at Bell Labs. And I applied, and Louis saw my application and invited me to spend a summer there, and I did, and that's how I met him. And I discovered through him a part of science that I hadn't known before, which really was fascinating. And because he was working on something that nobody else had worked on before, I just found that really amazing. What I had worked on as a graduate student was much more mature scientifically, much more established. It was fun too. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but discovering something that was really brand new, where every question is a new question, And none of those questions have had answers yet.
Mm-hmm.
That was, that's, to me, that's the beauty of going into the unknown, the exploration part of science. And that's what Lewis really taught me, is the importance of really asking new questions and exploring. And he is an incredible scholar, thinks really deeply. And I learned that from him as well, just to ask the right questions and keep going at it until you get an answer that you think is satisfactory. Because it's very easy to ask some questions and get some superficial answers and move on. But really, you want to understand things at a really deeper level. And that was really important. That was a really good lesson I learned from him. Mm. It served me well.
Yeah. There is one thing I would love, to maybe, and here I'm just trying to think about the environment, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you touched upon, the role of Lou in your curiosity, in the exploration part of your career. And I was just wondering about the Bell Labs as an environment.
Yes.
How important was that environment for opening your mind, for exploring new spaces, and to actually bring you to where you are today?
Oh, yeah, that was really important. Bell Labs doesn't exist anymore the way it existed before. It was an incredible institution. It was only possible because AT&T had a monopoly on the long-distance network. And AT&T didn't really care too much about what was happening at Bell Labs in retrospect. But they gave it a lot of money and allowed the scientists there to explore, freely. And all these inventions came out of Bell Labs, the transistor, photovoltaics, superconductivity, a lot of things came out. The fiber optic network, eventually came out of Bell Labs. And it was all these disciplines that were brought together, physicists and chemists and engineers, really working closely together. Bell Labs was rich in equipment, but didn't have much support staff. So every scientist there had a technician working for them, and maybe they had a postdoc. So unlike a university where you might have an army of graduate students, people at Bell Labs really had to think hard about what they were going to work on, because their ability to work on different things was a little limited because they didn't have a lot of hands to help them with. Mm-hmm. And so they had to choose their problems really well. And so the choice of problem then becomes really important. You want to work on something that's important, something that's hard, something that's new. You don't want to waste your time on something that's not going to lead anywhere. And so learning how to choose the problem is also something that was really important. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't only about opening up my eyes to a huge realm of science that I didn't know about, and the possibilities of combining different disciplines together. It was also about the choice of problems that that you should think about. Mm. It's an amazing place.
Yeah. I mean, very, very famed place, and I mean, it's sad it's no longer in the same form anymore. I mean, like the Xerox Park, and I think these places are. I mean, actually, by curiosity, is what type of people were actually part of Bell Labs back in the days? What were the kind of the environment in terms of people?
Oh, it was very driven. Mm-hmm. I mean, the people at Bell Labs were ambitious, driven, but a real community. We would all eat together at lunch. We would take a walk after lunch together. People would go play bocce together after lunch. Sometimes we'd go play basketball after during the afternoon. We would go in the morning and have coffee together, a small group have coffee and just talk about science or the world. It was a real community of scientists, very unique in that way. And I think that that sense of community, common purpose, really helped propel the discoveries at a high level.
Yeah. I just want to maybe on propelling discoveries, and because you had the funding of, this fellowship, right, was helping you, was funded by Bell Labs, and obviously to propel discoveries, and I think it's a common hurdle for many researchers, scientists, is funding research, and it's pretty crucial in to achieve any result, because it requires time, it requires resources, and obviously before having a Nobel Prize, how did you go about the funding piece of your work, and it's a crucial part of it, and it is sometimes difficult for first generation immigrants from that standpoint. And can you maybe develop on that point, on the funding piece?
Yeah. So when I came to MIT, as every young professor does, you're given a pot of money. Mm-hmm. With that pot of money, you can start your career. Mm-hmm. And there are also a lot of, at the beginning, there are a lot of what we would call beauty prize contests, basically where a few pages and your resume and you're given money based on your pedigree and what you've done and your letters. So I was able to get a number of those, and that's what funded me for 5 or 6 years, the beginning years. Mm-hmm. And that allowed me to have a lot of freedom to explore. And in some ways, you could say, it's because of the freedom I had at the beginning that I was able to do the work that eventually led to the Nobel Prize. But after that, then you're dumped into the normal funding environment, which is a mixture of government funding, foundations, and companies. And that is not something I'm very good at. I don't think that's related to being an immigrant. I think that's just some people are really good at it, and some people are just not very good at it. Yeah. The only thing I would say is because of being an immigrant, not having learned English until later as a kid, and always feeling a little bit of an outsider, I also felt a little bit of an outsider in the funding arena. I didn't, pursue with the vigor that I should have, perhaps the government funding, to basically work, volunteer in a bunch of panels and really get to know. By nature, I'm more of an introvert. I'm not particularly gregarious, and it helps to be able to make a lot of contacts with the people who fund research, mm-hmm. and to be able to schmooze and to be able to do all these things. And I'm not very good at that. So that was hard. That was hard, and it's always been hard. But somehow, I was able to survive the funding part of it. One of the ways that I was able to do that was because MIT is a great place to have centers of research. Mm-hmm. So centers are a place where a bunch of professors get together and write a big proposal and establish, a center for working on a particular thing. And I was lucky to be asked to be part of a number of centers and lead some, pieces of centers, so that I didn't have to be the one to basically go out by myself to get the money. There was somebody that was in charge. It was the director of the center that was better suited at doing these things than I was. So from that perspective, MIT was a good place for me because those centers were in place. And later on, once you get a little bit more well-known, then you can access the world of companies, funding from companies, because if your research is of interest commercially, then they'll come to you. And then once you have students or postdocs that have gone out and become part of that world, they'll come to you too. Mm-hmm. So the beginning was hard. But once you get started, you become part of the network of people, it becomes easier. I don't think that's an immigrant thing, though.
No, it doesn't feel like it.
Yes.
But actually, I wanna develop on one thing you referred to, and maybe it's a theme we discussed before. It's about, being an outsider.
Yes.
And how relevant it is to your research, actually, and how relevant it has been to to what has led to a Nobel Prize and to a research that is groundbreaking. Can you maybe develop on how being an outsider even in your field of study has driven your success, has driven you, and is your kind of a fuel for curiosity, a fuel for many things?
Yeah, sure. So I think that's been a really central part of my life, personally and professionally. When I came to the US as a kid, I really was the outsider. I had a funny name, spoke funny languages, and I was viewed as, even though at Purdue it was a community of outsiders in a way, most of the students there, most of the kids were American and were born in the US, they were fluent, etc. But I wasn't. And so from the very beginning, I felt like I was looking at things from the outside. And that's something that really never stopped. But if you accept that, I think if you don't fight it and embrace it, then it allows you to not worry about a lot of things. So going into a new field, exploring a brand new field that nobody cares about, you really are an outsider. It's a mixture of physics and chemistry and engineering and all that. So you don't really belong in any one discipline. You're outside of those disciplines, and you have to be comfortable with that. And I was, because that was my life. So it allows you to explore things that people may be less prone to do. And I think that was part of the success. Part of the success is not to care too much about what people thought.
Right.
You go into a brand new field, you go to a conference about a particular subject. Nobody else is working on what you're working on, and that's okay, So it allows you to maybe have a little bit of, if you embrace it again, it allows you to have a little self-confidence, confidence in trusting that as long as what you're doing is what you care about, what interests you, that's really the most important part. You don't have to work on something just because it's part of that community, that discipline, but rather because it's something that you think is important. And I think that's something, a message or a lesson that I think is important to people starting out in a career. It doesn't have to be science, is that, trust yourself. If you think it's interesting, then it's interesting. Just trust your instincts of where you're going. And be willing to ignore, the negative criticism maybe of others, because, you're the most important person. And so really trust what you think.
Thank you. It's what you're saying is really resonates, and I think what you're saying on trusting, what you think and your intuition and your gut feel, and and accepting that fact of being an outsider as embracing it was a key for you, and was a key for many, in groundbreaking work. Maybe one other quality, and if I try to think further here on being an outsider and that kind of resilience that you build with it, And something we discussed, and it's actually a field that your partner has written about, the resilience, and in general. Is it, how would you define resilience? How central is it to your life and your career, as you developed, further on?
Well, resilience is an important thing, because from the very beginning, if you come into a brand new place, you have to survive that. You have to survive it and thrive, and that really is what builds the beginning of the resilience part. Life is full of challenges. It's full of barriers and defeats and failures, especially science. The success in science is built on a road of failures. And often you try something, it doesn't work. You got to keep going. Mm-hmm. So building up this resilience, I think, is really important. I don't know how much more to say about that. I've seen examples of kids that were in my same situation that didn't do well. They couldn't survive this being an outsider, or they fought against it, and that didn't go well. So being able to really embrace that and then build on it and build that resilience, I think, is really important. It's really key. Mm. Yeah. Life is wonderful. Life is great. I really love life. There's so many things outside of science, that are really great. And you only get one shot at it, right? So you might as well enjoy it. So it's really something that I take to heart. When you have setbacks and stuff like this, you have to have confidence that you can overcome the setbacks, but also to remember that there's so much wonderfulness in life that it's okay. You got to keep going.
Exactly. It shall pass.
Yes. Tomorrow is a different day.
Exactly. Yeah, I really like your way of seeing life, and it reminds me actually of our Tunisian way of always looking at the bright side to life and to every day, and just seeing it as seeing the positive side of it. And I just want to actually develop a bit further on one thing, and from this conversation is, obviously you have embraced the setbacks, you have embraced them, loved them, you have built resilience, you have embraced being an outsider. So you're a man of multiple identities, right? You have a French mother, a Tunisian father. You grew up in the United States. You have multiple identities, and coming to a new country, and having to either integrate, assimilate. It's often a challenge, or sometimes it is an exercise that everyone has to do. How did you go about keeping all your identities in balance? I mean, your name is Moungi, right? You cannot change that.
Right.
Right. I mean,
oh, you can change it.
You can change that.
You
yes.
can change it.
It is actually true. You can change it.
I chose not to change it.
How do you go about, balancing your identities and keeping them thriving and flourishing, whilst at the same time adapting into the new environment you have been living in for several decades now?
Well, that's a really deep question. I mean, you can spend a lot of time talking about that. Yeah. It's a subject of many therapy sessions. It's complicated to try to balance all these identities. It's complicated because, one impulse is to fight it and to get rid of them and to basically try to assimilate completely. But that's really kind of impossible. It's always part of you, and the world around you is always going to remind you that it's part of you, whether you like it or not. So you have to live with it. But at the same time, at least for myself, having essentially three, I would say, nationalities or three cultures, the Tunisian, the French, and the American, and at the same time feeling a little bit of outsider, I kind of view them from afar, let's say. I think it allows me to think of the cultures and being able to embrace some of the positive parts of these cultures, and also be able to be critical of the more negative parts of the cultures. I think it has helped me to view the world also, in general, to build a worldview that I'm comfortable with, and to be able to see things for the good that they are, and for the negative parts sometimes, and to be able to recognize that the good and the bad come together, and you have to work with that. It's not binary, there's, and I think having come from these three cultures has helped me to deal with the nuances of life in that way. And also to appreciate at the same time then other cultures, that are not the ones that are mine, and to appreciate the good of them as well. When I travel around the world, which I like to do in different, whether it be in Asia or different parts of Europe, in South America, seeing different places and really appreciating their differences as well as their similarities. And I find that really, really fun, really rewarding to see that and to think about those things. Because we're all humans, we all have the same hopes and dreams, and it gets expressed in different ways, depending on where you live, depending on the history of the place. But ultimately, we all want the same thing. We want happiness, we want family, we want connections, and we want to be able to live a good life. For most people, that is.
For the vast majority.
Yes.
No, I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. And I think it's an interesting, the way you're putting it is, the way you're putting it shifts the onus on more, on an ability to actually see the difference in the other cultures, and to be curious, and to also be critical about your own self whilst balancing it, right? Not just like seeing it as a monolithic culture or monolithic identity. It's more like you're playing with it as different facets of something precious, and you just like play with it, and you keep it as part of your new identity, I would say.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, we have touched upon many interesting questions and points. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, it's more actually, if you were, let's say you were starting, you would see your young self starting at Harvard, in in your younger years, starting your bachelor, what advice would you give to yourself? Like, you look back now, we're looking back many years after, and this advice would apply to maybe to a broader population of brilliant minds coming to university and trying to undertake what they think is their passion. Your passion was, was chemistry back then, but let's say in another academic field. What advice would you give to yourself and to that younger version of you?
Yeah, I mean, this is an advice that I learned through decades, right? So when I was younger, I used to worry a lot more. I used to stress a lot more, be much more anxious about setbacks or the ambition of, succeeding. And my advice would be to enjoy life more. I don't regret my life, but, I wish I had enjoyed it a little bit more when I was younger, where I had been able to do things outside of my professional life, the research, at the beginning. I see my daughter, and she's able to enjoy life more than I was able to enjoy life. I think part of it is also because, being brought into this new culture that my parents really didn't know anything about, I think it actually was limiting in exploring the possibilities outside of academia, outside of school. When we first came here, it turns out I actually enjoy being athletic.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't part of the culture of France or Tunisia at all.
Zero.
But it is part of the culture here.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have probably enjoyed being part of that community as a kid or a young adult. And I didn't realize that until I was older in life. Things like this, where if you don't grow into that culture, part of that culture, there are parts of it that you just don't know about. So I wish, as a younger self, I had been able to say, okay, so just relax a little bit more and explore more of life.
Yeah. No, look, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Good.
Me too. I want to thank you for, for sharing. What has led to this wonderful career and all the wisdom you have, of life you have built throughout the years. And this was wonderful. Thank you, Moungi.
Yeah. Okay. Good.